previously for the Tennessee Right to Life, I had done a sectional essay contest. They asked me to be one of the judges for it, since I'm a public speaker and or have been and done that. And so they asked me to do that. So I did it. And then they had the winners from all the different sections in Tennessee come meet in Nashville for the statewide contest. So they asked me to judge one of the preliminary rounds. So I did that. And then so it's for high schoolers to get them involved in public speaking. It's the Right to Life movement is not just pro-choice versus pro-life and their stance on pro-life, but it's everything, euthanasia, genocide, just anything that has to do with life, including the death penalty. There's all kinds of different stuff that they're involved in, but obviously the biggest thing is the abortion thing. So a lot of people did their speeches about abortion, these high schoolers. And so I judged the first round of that. And then they had the winner. And I follow them on Twitter, Tennessee Right to Life. You can look up, see who the winner was. If you follow me, you can look at the likes I've done. And I liked the post of the girl who won. So that's where I was. How do you join up for what? How do we join up for Tennessee Right to Life?
Well, any Right to Life. Is it a state organization now, or how? Where do we join up?
Yeah, there's a national Right to Life.
What would you suggest?
Well, there's a national Right to Life, and then there's each individual state Right to Life. So I would suggest looking up your state, putting in Tennessee Right to Life, and then you'll find it. And then they have different chapters. They have different counties that are broken down. I believe that a couple of people from here have done that as well. And they're not the only organizations out there. There's other organizations that do something similar. I know that Tennessee has just helped put through. I got a kid here. Sorry about that. And one of the things that they're trying to get legislation pushed through here in Nashville, and they've got a lawyer that works with them and everything like that. So it's not just awareness. They're actually trying to make law and do that. So I would advise anyone who's in this state or in a different state to look up your state's Right to Life. I just called the office, talked to the guy and who runs it, and said, hey, I'm here to help. These are my qualifications. This is what I know how to do. If you need anything about that or anything else you think I could do, just let me know. And so that's how I got started.
You think it'd be a good idea to get one of those representatives on here?
Oh, yeah, I think that could be a very good idea. I think, we could probably get a few more people on too if we advertised it and told our friends about it. And, maybe they just went down to the easiest steps of how you could join. This is who we are, and this is what you can do. This is what we need from you. I don't think that would be a bad idea.
I reached out to one of the societies in Virginia, but I have not gotten any response from them. I was trying to get them to do a seminar on how to be effective in working with this topic, but they gave a nice presentation after one of the marches, but they haven't called back. They said they would do groups, but I haven't gotten anything back. I guess maybe I said it too weird in the email. I don't know.
Yeah, that can happen. That can happen when you're excited about something, for sure. I think that, just like anything, different organizations have different strengths and weaknesses. So the Tennessee Right to Life is really strong in some areas, and they're doing a nice job. But then I've met some of the other states that, aren't doing as well. So, who knows which one would be best for that, or if there would be a national, maybe the national one. I don't know, but we could definitely check into it. So that's what I've been up to. Did you guys get power back over there, Jackson? Or did you step away?
Yes, there's power on here now. You have a topic for today?
I do. I always do. But I always like to ask, I see some new people on here as well, or people that I don't recognize anyway. So is there anybody that has any questions or any tough topics or about anything that we talked about in the past that you might not have liked, or just in general? Does anybody have any questions or comments or controversies of their own?
We talked about this week resurrection versus reincarnation.
Okay, how'd that go?
We have questions. I think Lee's on here. I think that he and I were talking about it. There are some influential people on YouTube who are quasi-Hebrew roots that are soliciting for reincarnation now.
Who, like who?
Two that I know of, but I don't want to mention their names here.
Well, aren't they on YouTube and already saying it?
Well, can I say something?
No.
No, I can't? Okay.
Of course you can. You're the commander.
Basically, we were talking about, I was saying whether reincarnation or the resurrection of the dead, does it matter what we do if we believe either one? I don't think so. If it was a reincarnation, what would we do differently if we believed either one? I think we just need to live this life, or our only life, as best we can, influencing for good and righteousness as many people as we can influence. So whether we believe in reincarnation or resurrection of the dead is just a matter of a mental exercise. A belief, of course, but we don't do anything different unless you say, well, I could do it in the next life, or this life I'll do what I want. That would be the only thing. But we're supposed to, on either belief system, do the best we can for other people and for righteousness, and paying attention to what the Father has for us. So I didn't see much of a difference on what we do, whether we believe in either one. That was my comment when we were talking the other day.
Mm-hmm. Generally, I think that the main strand of reincarnation has to do with karma, and that when a person dies, they can be reincarnated as an ant or a flea or a cow or some other form of life, and then they work their way back up. I don't know what these people, the two I know of, I don't know what they believe concerning that, but that would certainly be something. If I was to be reincarnated, I would want to know something about it, that ahead of time, and what would keep me from becoming a louse or something like that.
We sow what we reap. We still have the same thing within our belief system, that whatever you sow is what you will reap. So what we do here is, and right now, we'll reap it. If we sow discontent, that's what we'll get back. So they have a different version of it, maybe semantics, but we have the same thing in sowing and reaping.
So what main scripture, whether inside the Bible or not, are they using for this basis?
I don't know. I haven't gotten into why they would, well, I guess people are talking about that they have bleed over, what I believe is bleed over from the memory in the blood. Our DNA has a latent strand within the blood, and I believe that is left over from our ancestor, from our family tree. Now, some people believe it was past lives that they actually inhabited. I just believe that this DNA strand holds memories of our past relatives. So now they may bleed through to our own consciousness here in our lifetime. So we think that they're past reincarnations of ourselves. You know, I noticed it's interesting that nobody believes they're reincarnated from a ditch digger. They're always reincarnated from Cleopatra or Alexandria or somebody famous. Nobody wants to believe that they're reincarnated from Joe Fontagnats down the street. So to me, it's kind of fallacy, but I do believe that we have memories of our ancestors in our blood. That's somewhat scientific, but I can't prove it myself. But I believe we should live according to sowing and reaping. That whatever we do, we're going to sow here in this life, if you believe in reincarnation, or in the next. So I don't have a problem with people believing that, as long as they do well now. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to investigate in my own self, to see people that believe in the reincarnation. Where would they get that from? Or is there an alignment with that, with mainline Christianity or Hebrew roots or whatever? So
I don't think there's an alignment with it with mainline Christianity for sure. I think
I know where they get it. I remember from our last debate on this subject, they get it from Pharisaical sages, rabbis, about the transmigration of the soul. The idea that the soul is independent of the body, and that the soul is immortal. And when a person dies, that soul goes into somebody else. That almost sounds like demonology, doesn't it? You remember when we were talking about it with an individual a couple of months ago, I guess, who reads a lot of rabbinical literature, ancient rabbinical stuff, esoteric stuff.
What is it with you and names, Jackson? You're too funny.
He doesn't want any negative rebuttal after he mentions a name. That's what it is. Email right now.
Well, you see, there's also a practical reason, because that means when I edit this, I have to go and reverse the name.
Oh, so you're into backwards masking now, huh? I see how it is.
I've heard my name in people's broadcasts, podcasts.
Sure.
Where they put forward something they think I said and criticize me for that. I don't think it's really a good thing to mention names on something that's going to go out.
Sure.
But
okay, well,
I don't know.
I would say that my first take on it is this, and I go back to traces of it in the New Testament, and it's expounded more fully in the Clementine recognitions, is that don't run ahead of the knowledge that you have been given. Don't so in the Clementines, he says it basically just straightforward. If I teach something different than the master taught me, then I'm no longer an ambassador for the master, right? Even if I'm trying to take 3 or 4 strands of truth and turn it into a new truth, but then that the master didn't teach me that, then now I'm no longer, because if he would have wanted me to know it, he would have taught it to me. And so if you want to be an ambassador for someone, you represent who they are and what they stand for. And clear cut, what I can see is that we do have evidence for resurrection from the dead from the master's lips, and we don't have evidence for reincarnation from the master's lips. That would be the simplest way that I would put it. So then if we're advocating for reincarnation, then we are no longer ambassadors for the master. We're an offshoot, and we're our own. We're doing our own thing.
Good point.
So any other comments on that? We've got a couple of chat questions also that we can talk about. Okay, no other questions, no other comments. We'll do this then. Hunter says, how has Lena Einhorn's work on the time shift affected your faith or view of the New Testament? Okay. I'll start. I'll answer that, and anybody else can pipe in.
Sure, I want to pipe in too.
Yeah. Here's what I would say, Hunter. I don't know you. We've interacted a couple of times, I think. But first of all, anytime that I get into studying myself or listening to an idea that could affect my faith, then I immediately have certain ground rules. And the ground rules are, number one, anything that cannot be proven, if they go on past their point and they didn't prove it, I don't go on. Because now they're assuming that it was proven, and they're going to be making points, facts, quote unquote, pseudo facts, if you will, off of that point that wasn't proven as if it was proven. And then if I continue reading, continue going on, then that can affect my faith, and it's not on a fact. So I don't do it. And some people don't go that way. They read everything all to the end, and then they determine whether they want to believe it or not. But to me, that is extremely dangerous, and there's nothing I can do to change anything in that book, but that book or that teaching can change me. That book is that book. The words on the book are fixed. But in me, they can change me by affecting me. So if they're trying to affect me by something that's not proven, then I'm not going to let it affect my faith. Number two is I am past the point, and I don't know where you are, Hunter, but I'm past the point of infallibility or inerrancy of the Bible. So I understand that there are, especially in the manuscripts that we have, that there are errors, there are redundancies, there are things that were purposely changed. There are things where there's doublet stories. And the reason for the doublet is because another group wanted to get another idea in there. So they just made the story again and put their version of it. So I get all that, especially in the Tanakh. But even in what's called the New Testament, there were certain agendas and certain paradigms that were going on that everybody wanted to get in there. So it doesn't affect me. Is there a real reason why there could be a time shift? And could that time shift be true? And could there be a reason for it? That doesn't affect the deeper points of my faith, that the commandments are from the Father, that Yeshua came to live for and eventually die for those commandments. And according to his words, if we live according to those commandments, we will inherit eternal life. So that doesn't affect anything about was he born in 4 BC or 2 AD, or did he live to 30 or 33 AD, or did he live to 52 AD, or whatever it is. That doesn't affect anything. I do think that it is it's an outcome of the Catholic Church trying to dictate what people can and can't believe, by us ultimately getting to this place where we think that the Bible has to be 100% accurate. And if you can find one thing of inaccuracy in the Bible, then the whole thing is not true. No, the Bible is a collection of books, and even those books have undertaken editing and different things like that. So we got to understand that the Bible as a whole is a compilation of books, but if they were, if something's found out to be an error in one of the books, that doesn't mean I think that the whole thing should be just tossed out. So I look at the Bible and other scripture, Enoch, Esdras, Sirach, all of these other things, as individual books that were written for the purpose of getting closer to Yah, some with pure intentions and some with shady intentions. And the more I can let go of some of these things that would conflict with my faith in Yah, including inerrancy, then the closer I can get to him, and the purer my heart can be to help other people and to walk forward with the true faith, regardless if some of the things passed down to us were inaccurate. So I don't know if that helps you out at all, Hunter, but that's how I have to do it, or else I'd be, a theological mess.
For me, nothing like that can affect my faith. I think that, well, I had been aware of that time shift for a long time. What she does, though, is she puts together a very cogent argument for this
Yeah.
possibility.
She does.
And the question is why she didn't answer that. But my theory is
She
that,
did answer it, but I thought it was completely
oh, yeah, at
off
the end,
base.
yeah. I believe that Epaphroditus wrote Luke Acts. Epaphroditus is a historical character, well referenced. The main reason that I believe that Epaphroditus wrote that is because he was on the journey with Paul and because he was close to Josephus. They were best friends. And the writer uses a lot of Josephus in Luke Acts. Now, I think he wanted to keep his identity hidden because in that day, the law said that if you write about these people, insurrectionists and so forth, then you are liable to the same punishment. Epaphroditus was finally martyred by Domitian, and this may be the reason why, because it would have been right after Luke Acts was written. It's pretty sure that those two books were written around 95 AD. Because of the use of Josephus, and we know that his Antiquities was written in the early 90s. And so I don't think that the writer of that wants to stand for the crimes that supposedly the zealots there we find in Acts were guilty of. And so it would be an easy enough thing to put it back out of his lifespan. But I think very convincing, though, as to that 20 years difference. But again, it doesn't affect my faith. I would suggest anybody that is interested in a historical perspective of especially Acts ought to read this book. But if you're having trouble with your faith, if you're on the edge, then I wouldn't suggest you read anything that's historically could be historically accurate, because, well, so many people do lose their faith when they go into seminary or something and they begin to learn just exactly what you talked about, Rich, a minute ago, about the redactions of the scriptures. So that's my opinion. I love the idea that Josephus mentions Joshua in the Egyptian. And there's another character in Josephus that is so like Joshua. In fact, his name is Joshua. Joshua, son of Hananias, who during the siege of Jerusalem is always crying out, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." You remember that character? And finally, everybody beat him and tried to kill him because of his curse. It was really curse on the zealots there. But no matter how much they beat him, he just continued to go around giving that message of woe. We certainly see that in the Revelation. We've got 3 woes there. We've got this guy named Joshua there, son of Ananias, which that was the Zadokite priest, that was the last of the Zadokite priests. I think that we can look into him some more. I do believe that Joshua, either in the flesh or not, was present in Jerusalem during the siege. I just want to believe that, because he says he was coming back. I believe that's the time that he did come back. I don't mean to try to make you think I'm a heretic or not. Just what I preached this morning, I believe that the Word was made flesh and came from the Father. Nothing's going to shake that belief. It's been too long, and I've had too many attacks on it and haven't succumbed to any of them. But as for the historicity, that really interests me. And she has such a good argument for this, except her conclusion. It's like she does a wonderful argument until about the last chapter, and then she jumps to a conclusion that is,
Right.
to me, ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% on the her argument. It was great. She did a great job. And it doesn't even. I think that one of the things we got to understand is we have been brought up. If you're brought up Catholic or Protestant, it's that Western Roman Christianity in that kind of thinking. And in that kind of thinking, if you don't agree on every point or something like this, you can get excommunicated, anathema, killed, whatever it was. So I think we've got to get rid of that kind of thinking. But it's so hard because you're told, hey, if all your family's Church of Christ and you're not Church of Christ, and you're going to a church that plays an organ in the service, then you're going to hell, that you're burning forever in hell, which when you step back and think about it, it's just absolutely ludicrous. But so are all the other things that, hey, if you don't believe the way I believe, or if, then you're not going to make it or whatever. I think in one sense, in the very small centralized sense, there are a few core tenets that need to be adhered to. But outside of that, and like I was saying earlier, in response to Lee's question about reincarnation, do we have evidence from the master's mouth that this is something that not only is important, but that he even talked about at all? Why are we trying to insert, ideas about whatever it was, baptism or Trinity, or into these manuscripts, knowing full well that Yeshua didn't speak about the matter? So we've become a God within ourselves by trying to say that, hey, they didn't speak about this, but this is what they really meant. And that's why I don't like the defense of Yeshua or Paul or Peter or anybody. Well, they said this, but what they really meant is that. And so to me, that's the bigger issue, is that I can't subjectively say what they meant or said, 2,000 years ago. It's just stupid. And if we put it into just a human understanding court of law, it would not be admissible. They would say that that's hearsay. That's not even hearsay. That's you're making up what they meant was. It doesn't even pass the smell test, but yet somehow, because somebody says it with conviction, because somebody says it very energetically, because it's been believed for a few generations and they've codified it with a statement of belief or a doctrinal stance or some encyclical or apostolic constitution or whatever it is, that somehow it must be true, even though it's not defined, even though it's not defined that way in the scriptures. Anyone else?
Yeah, I wanted to throw in there real quick this idea about history and the scripture, and comparing the two. I see a lot of times that there might be a tendency, not for everybody, but just in general, to try to see that history confirms the Bible, whereas I think it maybe just should be the other way around. Like, does the Bible confirm what history says? Because someone may write something in history, and they may be saying exactly what happened from their perspective, but their perspective may be completely wrong, making what they say not actually even true, or giving you a different idea of it, or just not the word of God, just not actual truth, but just somebody's hearsay or somebody's opinion about some event. And I've been reading this book, Introduction to the New Testament, and the way that this guy frames certain things in history, it's like what he's saying is true, but is the things he's drawn from it, or is the context he's putting it in, or all these things, are they necessarily true? And I've been noticing, like, there's all these different times where I can see it's just his theology that's framing it like this, whereas he's writing it as if it's true, because that's how he sees it, as if it's true, even though it's just someone's opinion of an event that happened in history and not necessarily, the word, like what truth is. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but that's just an idea.
That's good, Desmond. That's a good point, and it works both ways. I mean, you're talking about history and how did they frame it correctly, but this guy is, taking his theology and causing it to subjectively frame the history. So, you're absolutely right. Not from the historical standpoint and from the theological standpoint. Yeah, we've got to be able to, and then we have our subjective, right? We have a subjective way of looking at things. It's hard to get a person to understand something when their faith, I put it a couple of times, I think a while ago on Twitter. I think I most recently did it a few months ago. I redid it, where it's saying most people don't have faith in God, Elohim. They have faith in their idea of Elohim. Once you crush or show that one of their ideas of Elohim is incorrect, then it causes their whole faith system to crumble. And so I think so many people, this is attached to their faith system. It's not just, for some people it is, they've got an argumentative spirit and they want to be right about everything, et cetera, et cetera. But for a lot of people, it's man, I want to argue this point because if you can prove this point is wrong, since my faith is not correctly in him and it's in him and these points that I think about him, then if you crack one of these, then my whole thing falls apart. So I think that's one reason why people defend a certain doctrine or something so strongly. But I think that one of the things that is the hardest to do is to just even start on this journey, to get somebody to start on the journey, which is why the Clementine recognitions say don't even try to force somebody to start on this journey. As a matter of fact, do the opposite. Make sure that they're ready. Even if they tell you they're ready, you don't give them some of these things that you see until you know for sure that they're ready. And he says, even if it's your son, you don't pass it to your son, not the general principles of faith, but I'm talking about the deeper things where you're having to get challenged and it's saying you've got to make sure that this person is ready to receive some of this stuff or it's going to crush them and it's going to do more harm than good in the end. But that's a good point, Desmond.
As to the recognitions, you're right. I'm in the middle of producing an audio book of that. I'm through the first 3 books now to get through the 10 books. But once again, that I'm looking at this, speaking of what I call the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles, it's done in such a fashion that these mysteries are so much easier to understand because it's in dialogue with Simon Magus, pagan. And he's explaining things, one thing after the other. Now, whether the dialectic was historical or not really doesn't make a difference. What he's doing is he's taking our faith, Ebionite or Nazarene faith, from the very beginning through the complete understanding in a Socratic method so it can be easily understood. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this audio book, because that's a long book to get through. But if it's a dramatized audio book, then I think people will learn what's in there. It is an important reference. That's all. I just want to make you aware that I should have that thing finished maybe in the next 2 weeks.
Can I say something, Jack? Can you hear me?
If you take your hat off.
Well, you like my hat?
It's a beautiful hat.
Thank you. I got this from Texas last October. I think this September, actually. But
it's perfect for you.
What, for me? Why?
It takes the pineapple off your head.
I gavolt. Anyway, the mysteries, and I think I did a sermon about this maybe 1 or 2 years ago, in which I thought that in that sermon, I talked about how it's our jobs as pastors, it's our jobs as leaders to protect the mysteries of the Almighty. that was passed down to the apostles. Because as Rich was talking about, you could cause somebody actually to stumble if they are not ready. We know people that have come into the Yah and that have gotten deeply involved in the study of the Nazarene Acts and the Clementine homilies and other versions of this, and they have gotten lost today. They're right now lost because when this stuff was presented, emotionally and spiritually, they were not mature. And as a result of them not being mature, they ended up making the Nazarene Acts or the and Clementine homilies this sola scriptura of what they believed. And they started to begin to tear out the sacrifices. They began to tear out this. They began to tear out that. Before you know it, where are they now? They're out in the parking lot because they did not have that grounding. I think the sermon that I talked about the letter being delivered to James, and then that same letter being read by in front of the Zechariah about the protection of Peter's writings. So, that's my thought.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, on that same note, I would just bring up something that I've read a few times in the Bible when it talks about like milk and solid foods, that you have this milk, the principal doctrines of Christ, repenting from dead works and things like this. But then you have the meat, which would kill a baby. And we're all babies when we first come in. So we can't give them nothing too heavy, too, I don't know what the word is, but just, too heavy for them, until they got a good grasp on that basic foundation of the Messiah. And then once they got that, who can pluck you from his hand at that point?
Okay, anyone else?
I got one more thing. And this is Frank Hout, blessed be his memory, talked about this exact thing and how he used a natural scenario to bring this out about when you have a child and the child starts on milk, it starts on basic things, and then as the child matures and it grows and it learns, some things being innate, some things have to be taught. Then you give more and more and more. You don't just give away the house before time unless you end up with a disaster. You've seen several movies, house party, things of that nature, in which it depicts this very thing. So just be aware of that.
I never in my wildest dream imagined that house party was going to be mentioned in this segment.
Yeah, I have something too. I think that is also something that Frank Hout said is that we have to gauge where people are at, whether it be levels of faith or whether it be literally grade levels, because if somebody is third grade level in understanding, and this is just an idea that you can better understand where they're at, and you're on the sixth grade level, or let's just say that you're doctorate level and whatever you're talking about, they're not going to understand you unless you condescend in a good way, hopefully, to their level. Or maybe you speak at the fourth grade level and explain things to them that way so that they can understand. A lot of the things that we're dealing with or in the Messianic faith, if you will, are things that a lot of people don't understand. That the way we speak, maybe the names that we use, the words that we speak, it's hard enough that we're saying that their understanding, which is their God in this sense, is wrong. But then you go on and on and on and on, and you will lose them in a couple paragraphs or a couple hundred words.
Okay, anyone else? Anybody got anything else?
All right, devil's advocate. I don't think you should lock up any books. I think you should nurture your people. I think that you need to provide them with a better understanding if they have a misunderstanding of something. But I think taking things away from people's reach is censorship, and if you take it away from them, they'll find something in the world that's even worse. Sorry, just my 2 cents worth.
That's a valid point. I agree with what you said. I came in late a little bit, so I'm trying to get the context of your talk. I think it's very difficult to judge someone's maturity and where they're at in their spiritual walk. And, I think we're trying maybe to be too much keepers of maybe what the Ruach would do in someone, and know that sometimes if people do go down the wrong track, that doesn't mean they're completely and totally lost forever. So I would probably lean toward not being the caretaker of what people can and not read.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously you're going to have different viewpoints. The problem comes in my mind, is when because that kind of statement from you two, the last two comments, means that anything goes. And I don't think that a society can survive with the anything goes mentality.
I don't think that means anything goes for somebody to read and judge for themselves and let them use their own intellect and their own,
right.
spirit. I think that, I don't.
Well, that
I'm
is
not
anything
sure.
goes, which is fine.
Anything goes to read anything?
Well, meaning from my perspective, in a civilized society, you can't, first of all, just, and this is going to get onto a whole different topic, but, I think that, because in my mind, it immediately goes beyond religious texts. Now we're talking about, there's texts that are going to claim to be religious, but are really, not religious, and it's going to lead a society down a way that is not good. And if those things are just, hey, this is this, you can read it, and wherever it takes you, I think the ultimate end to that society is bad.
I thought we were talking in the context of religious texts, but again, I think I can definitely read something for historical perspective. And, people read Mein Kampf to, know the philosophy of Hitler. Doesn't mean they're going to follow his path, but, sometimes some of those things are necessary to read. Doesn't mean you're going to embrace the ideology and follow that path necessarily.
I think what Rich is talking about is that as people who serve in the body, we have to be careful that we're not giving someone that is a novice a loaded gun. I mean, I think we can all agree that we wouldn't give a child a loaded gun. Could we agree to that? So, but you could do it as well spiritually by giving somebody something that they're not necessarily ready for. And it could lead them off in a whole different direction. And, Peter talks about us being accountable for the souls of the people in the body. And if one of these souls get lost, we're held accountable, especially those that serve in any capacity of leadership. So we do have to, and I know a lot of people don't like to hear this, but we do have to judge, and we do have to, especially with the new stuff, the historical stuff, we have to know whether somebody's ready so that we don't lose them. Our job is to protect those people.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting point. I mean, obviously, from Marcel's perspective, we're in some of these issues and some of these problems because a group of people said, hey, we have the knowledge of the truth and we're going to do it here. And this is how it goes. And anybody who goes against us is destroyed. And, and then that's how we got into some of the places that we are. So I definitely get what you're saying. But at the same time, I don't swing the other way at all. Completely the other way. Even the founding of this nation was based upon the idea that certain people were fit to lead and certain people weren't. And whether they were right or wrong in all of their hypotheses or whatever they brought forward, the general premise is correct. I mean, you can't have someone who is mentally, or you shouldn't have someone who's mentally unstable leading. You shouldn't have someone who is a complete, unlearned person leading. That goes with just in general in the natural, scope of things. So I think if you bring that over into a religious or spiritual context, the same thing. I shouldn't have someone who's never seen some of these things before just be able to lead or be able to. And so at some point you're trying to do it objectively, but at some point they're like we were even talking about with what Desmond was bringing up. It's there's subjectiveness that gets into it, even though even with people that are truly trying to be objective, and then we have bad people, some of which aren't trying to be objective. So it is definitely it's definitely a tough spot, which is why the saying goes out that you should only want people to lead that don't really want to lead. You should want smart, good people, and you have to coax them into saying, "Hey, be our leader," because the ones that want to grab it and want to be the leader are the ones that are going to be the most subjective and end up being the worst. So, and then again, too, even in the Clementine recognitions, there were times when Peter wasn't going to say something to the group, but then they said, "Come on, we're ready." And then he said, "Okay, at this point and at this time, I'll tell you about this." And they kind of coaxed him into saying more. You could even take this isn't a learning thing, but you could take the thing of the first miracle and the wine, and he wasn't going to do it, and then she kept on him, and so then he did it. So there's that. I think there's a dynamic about it, but I think that I don't know. I think that there's another thing that goes, if you dumb it down so much, then you get these people that won't be named, but that are on TV and have huge churches, and it's almost not even a religious service anymore. It's just more of a motivational speaking, as to dumb it down so low that it's not even coherent what it should be. So, I think we could probably talk about this all day long.
Yeah, I was going to say, in this day and age with the internet and stuff, I mean, all the information is out there. All the sacred writings and the text and this and that,
that's true.
Access to everything is there. So it's like, the honor of kings is to search out a matter that God has hidden. And so when they get to that point where they're searching for this hidden mystery, they can find it without anybody's help. But if they don't know where to look and they're coming to you and they're like, "Man, I got this thing, can't quite figure out." And, you can see where they are in their walk, that yes, they're diligent, they're looking, they're searching, and they're just looking for this piece they can't find. Then, yeah, you could lead them to something that, you believe in, that you think is true and stuff like that. But just to give it all to them right in the beginning, I think that's just like opening so many doors that could lead in so many different directions that, you got to wait until they're ready. And I think they'll let you know when they're ready, because they're going to hunger for more.
All right. Anybody else have anything? Don't give away the farm. Yeah. But yeah, you're right there. People have access and in this day and age, and we're putting this on, on YouTube, I would assume. So, people don't even listen to this. So, there might be a shift because there's so much access, that getting it out there and getting the correct stuff out there so that they have something to juxtapose whatever, craziness is out there might even be. Like Marcel and Allison say, the way to go, especially in this day and age. But anything else before we wrap up for the week? Anyone?
Yeah, I want one of the things that we're putting together those types of things over here at the Heart of East Tennessee. And one of the things we made that decision, if you go on our website, you'll see that there is construction for a initiation, an initiates page, in which, those things like the NASDAQs and things of that, those things are they're locked down. They're locked down until, you've been with us for a while, you know who we are, you know what we teach, you know what we believe, so that when you're exposed to them, you can have appropriate, educated questions. It's not just for everybody, because we know being over here, we're going to have everybody and their mama on that website. Some things are open to the public, but there are certain things that are not open for the public for their safety. And I truly believe that the shepherds and pastors were responsible for that. That's my thoughts on it.
All right, good conversation, you guys. I like it. I think that that both points are valid. I think to think about it from a multifaceted point of view is good. Anything else? Anyone else? Jackson, are you out there?
Yeah.
Okay. I had some good stuff. I've got a couple of different ways for next week. And if anybody has any, please put it in the chat for things you want to talk about. But I've done a little bit more studying about Zionism and the possible different avenues you could take on it. I think that I found a difference, and I think I can show it between certain forms of Zionism, whether it be biblical or modern, or in the different things that can go on there, which would be a very interesting topic. I think everyone would be interested in hearing that. And then also I've got a whole nother thing that just even about the discussion that we talked about right now about what do you share and what do you don't. I just read a work that while I didn't agree with everything, almost kind of like the Lena Einhorn thing, it was just an amazing job was done of presenting their point, and it would be a hugely controversial point. I might slip it to Jackson and see what he thinks. Give me permission to do it, but yeah. So we got some good stuff coming up, and really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Rich. Thank the rest of you too for chiming in so well today. This is going to make a great podcast.
Yes. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.